You are warmly welcome once again to the Procurement Podcast with Joseph Enim Ado. In our first episode, we spoke about the evolution of procurement and supply chain. And we also saw the weaknesses in the traditional procurement processes. Today, we'll be speaking about how institutions are taking advantage of the various emerging technologies in their procurement processes. And today, our guest for the show is Mr. Ifeanyi Ojoh. He will take us through how these various technologies are helping making procurement processes seamless, visible, and enabling companies gaining value for money. So without much ado, I would like to ask, what are the various emerging technologies that are being employed by companies across the world?
All right, thank you, Joseph, and thanks to our audience that will be listening in. First of all, I will start by stating that organizations and businesses are operating in a VUCA environment. VUCA standing for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment due to customers' changing need and market dynamics. To achieve and sustain a supply chain that is responsive to the changing needs of the customer, market dynamics, and the volatile business environment that we are operating in today, there is need for organizations to, design and implement a supply chain that incorporates these emerging technologies that have been proven to change or improve procurement and supply chain processes. There are a couple of these technologies that are increasingly being adopted by various organizations. And I will just give a few examples of these emerging technologies. The first of them is the cloud computing. Cloud computing basically is a concept where the infrastructure that is powering the platform that organizations are using are hosted by another organization, and basically the end user organization connects to those platforms through the internet. Supply chain clouds are basically shared supply chain platform between clients, suppliers, and customers that provide real-time collaborative supply chain solutions. So the planning process, the sourcing and ordering process, the contracting process, the distribution and warehousing process, the payment process up to disposal are actually interconnected between the client and the customer. And one advantage why cloud-based supply chain platforms are preferred is because they are scalable to meet the changing need of any size supply chain. So cloud computing allows various supply chain applications and platforms to work and exchange data with one another in a real time. And it's also very, very swift. And also, it requires less attention from the end user because a third-party organization is obviously providing the cloud services to the organization. That is one of the technology. The other technology that is gaining eminence in our supply chain world is the Internet of Things. Today, supply chain is utilizing Internet of Things such as RFID, radio frequency identification, sensors, GPS tags, chips, and barcode to track and provide real-time information between the location of an inventory and communicating this data to an application which enhances the visibilities of inventory route to all supply chain partners. So the example is if you have a truck or you have a warehouse, each of the items in your warehouse can actually have a sensor or a tag such that wherever that item is, it can centrally be located through the Internet of Things application. That is this unique identifier that you can track and know where your item is. It is in a truck that is traveling from location A to location B. You can actually get real-time information about the location of the truck and exactly where the items are. So that level of visibility enables for proactive planning and for business continuity. Furthermore, supply chain are also leveraging robotics for order pickup and fulfillment through Internet of Things that results in accelerated consumer delivery after purchase. The third emerging technologies I will talk about, which I believe everyone is talking about also today, is big data analytics. You see, big data analytics have evolved and now adopted as a competitive advantage tools and techniques for organization in recent years. So, today supply chain, harvest a lot of data, and this data are actually containing some very intelligent information that organizations can take advantage of to make in their decision-making process. Actionable analytics, which supply chain function can utilize to unearth insights on customer demand pattern, enables for supply chain agilities also. Actionable analytics power smarter decisions and next best action, which is basically around predictive insight. So you can already know through big data by analyzing quantum of data from your customer, you can see the demand pattern and meeting demand accurately to solve sourcing challenges and potentially reduce operational costs. The last, but not the least, of these technologies that I'll talk about also is the blockchain technology. Supply chain also deal on trust. Supply chain also deal on visibility, which is becoming very key given the recent issues that the entire supply chain has faced due to the pandemic. Supply chain can leverage on blockchain technology to monitor and obtain real-time details of a required asset or material. It also can be used to track shipment to better predict where shipment is, when it will arrive, and in what condition. And it's also one of a way to also track sustainability. For example, you want to know the source of the raw material. You need to know where it's coming from, where the material have been before arriving at your facility. So with blockchain, firms and organizations can improve the traceability of their goods and their services. Thank you.
Thank you for your submission. So we now understand that we have cloud computing, we have Internet of Things, we have big data analytics, which are all the emerging trends that are being used by companies to ensure that there is visibility, there is real-time communication, there is proper planning of all procurement activities, and even the use of robotics to ensure that where there is the need for machine to work on stuff where human beings are not able to work on, those robots take charge and work for us. So we are seeing the importance of these things. But then we must also get to know that knowing it is not enough. We must understand how we are able to apply these things in our companies. So then we move on to get to ask Mr. Ojoh how those emerging technologies are making procurement processes more agile and lean.
All right. Thanks, Joseph. So, again, I've always loved to answer the question of how and not what, because obviously, if you go into Google today and type in cloud computing, I'm sure you see tons of definitions of cloud computing. But then the puzzle is always, so how do we take advantage of all these potentials that has been talked about that we are looking at? I'll start with cloud computing. Today, the legacy ERPs that most organizations are using are on-premise. That is, it is installed in a server located somewhere within their premise. One of the disadvantages of the on-premise is that when you leave that premise, let's say in your office, if you leave your office, you can no longer access that application. For example, the application you use for demand planning, for forecasting, for monitoring raw materials, for raising purchase order, for processing vendors, for reconciliation. If those applications are on-premise, it means, as the word is, you have to be within that premise for you to be able to have access to them. And that actually leads to some form of delay in processes. And also, it's basically very cumbersome to maintain because every now and then you would need to probably upgrade a certain part of the infrastructure, which increases the operational cost of the institution. However, cloud computing, like I have mentioned before, are basically a shared supply chain platform that can be accessible from anywhere on the go, and all the parties within the supply chain can have real-time access to the platform, and they can collaborate real time. For example, between me and you, I can be making input on a certain portion of the planning sheet, and you can also be seeing the input I am making real time, and you can also make your own input, and so on and so forth. So these are the advantages that cloud computing brings. So organizations are meant to, if you're already running a legacy ERP that is on premise, you should consider migrating to a cloud-based solution. Cloud-based solutions are also scalable. That is, if there is need for your organization to expand or reduce your requirement, it is very easier for you to scale up or scale down if you are cloud-based. And one advantage that gives is the fact that it gives you a faster turnaround time to make required changes to your processes. In addition to that, it's also far cheaper than the on-prem, because the infrastructure, you don't need to invest in buying servers or buying the databases, because this will be provided by the third-party cloud solution provider. That is on cloud computing. Now, going over to the Internet of Things, robotics process automation. There are a couple of repetitive processes that we undertake today, such as processing invoices or reconciling invoices. Today, many organizations manually have to check line by line the numbers in those invoices. Maybe they put it in a spreadsheet, compare and contrast. That is prone to error. It's prone to human error. It is very slow, and it's also very cumbersome. However, if we take advantage of robotics process automation, you can actually automate repetitive tasks using robots. So robots are actually configured. Basically, you give them a set of instructions based on how you run your process, so they can autonomously run the process for you, even when you're not there. So you have a little human interface with the process. Giving an example, robotics can, within milliseconds, match hundreds of invoices with your purchase order, and it can flag purchase orders or invoices that are not in compliance with some set rules, or that doesn't match with the purchase order that is being referenced. These are some of the processes that humans will take several weeks to complete, but this will take robots a few minutes or a few seconds in most cases to complete. For blockchain technology, part of sustainability that the world is preaching today is knowing the source of your materials. Where were these materials produced? Maybe you order for a raw material from China or from Germany or from the US or from Australia, wherever from the world. Today, you don't have a real-time details of where those materials are coming from. You can hardly track the shipment, to better predict where they are. I'm not talking about the tracking where you know that, the shipment is now in port or it is now in transit. But where exactly is it, and what condition is it in? Has it been diverted to somewhere? Has it been mutilated? Has it been adjusted after it left the facility? Blockchain provides an enhanced supply chain visibility that can enable organizations to have real-time knowledge of where their assets are, the condition of their assets, and whether the asset has been adjusted. That is on for assets. For processes as well, blockchain technology can also be applied in our sourcing process. So you want to review a contract, you want to make sure that the contract terms and conditions are not adjusted after it has been signed up or agreed. Blockchain can come in there because blockchain is actually interconnected ledgers, hyperledgers, where every party in the chain have a unique identifier, and any action taken along the chain is actually visible to every party. So if you, Joseph, in the chain make a change to a document or to an invoice, I get a real-time notification with timestamp, with audit trail of what you are doing. So it reduces fraud. It can reduce the fraud. It can also reduce error, and it also provides trust. Again, because there is an audit trail, if you are aware that you make changes to a contract, a smart contract within the blockchain, it will be picked up. You will actually think twice before you make any change, especially if it is not in the interest or in line with the prior agreement within the contract. So that is where blockchain technology come into play. A typical example is that of a company that is utilizing blockchain very well is Apple. So Apple is actually exploring blockchain, integrate blockchain in its mineral supply chain process to improve transparency and also quell human right abuse concerns. So here I talk about the fact that you want to know where your materials are coming from, in what condition, who are the people working on it. Are they in a factory or in a place where they are abusing human rights, or they are using child labor to produce the material you are using? So it's not just enough to receive materials, but blockchain will enable you to understand, gain transparency and visibility into how your materials or the asset you're using were manufactured and in what condition. The last but not the least is the big data and analytics. Today, we are all depending on a lot of insight to proactively take action to change or make adjustment to our approach to meeting customer needs. There is need to have, to have predictive insight. So you are proactively planning what needs to happen. And this can only be possible with leveraging big data analytics. The good thing is that most of this technology I'm mentioning today can actually be embedded in a single platform. So it's not like, oh, am I going to buy blockchain separately and buy cloud solution separately? No, when you're looking out for a software or a supply chain or procurement solution, you should look out for the one that has all of these technologies embedded in it already. So it's not going to be a concern of whether, oh, how do I get, it should be embedded. So you have a dashboard that gives you information about the number of orders you have, number of orders that are delaying. You can see the rate at which production are going and the available raw material in the warehouse. Even without you going to the production floor or going to the warehouse, you can already see if there's going to be a challenge with shortage. So before the warehouse run out of raw material and the production is still going, you can already see, based on the information or insight from the big data analytics, you can already see what is happening, and you can proactively take action to basically reorder. And one thing that is also important is that supply chain is also moving to a platform-based approach where both suppliers and the end users and the organizations are in the same platform. So instead of having to write email to your supplier can actually be allowed to have visibility to their materials, the material they've supplied to you. So when it is hitting a certain threshold, all of you, both the supplier and the end users can actually get the trigger that, look, we are going to run out of raw material if we don't place order between this time. So the supplier also, knowing that they also have to run their own production process, they can proactively also start producing whatever material you need to meet your requirement before you even make that request. So what this does is that it improves and transforms efficient consumer response, which we call ECR. ECR is the ability to hear the voice of the consumer and swiftly provide a direct response. And this can be possible by utilizing the insight from big data analytics. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ifeanyi Ojoh, for showing us how these emerging technologies enable and help procurement processes to be very seamless. But before we sign off, there is something you spoke about, and I think in looking at the African space, we are not really focused on that. And I want just to us to shed more light on it, on the platform-based approach. I think that there is so much darkness with regards to the procurement professional and the supplier. Can you elaborate a bit on that before we sign off?
Yeah, absolutely, Joseph. So, like I had mentioned, organizations and businesses are faced with uncertainty, with turbulence, with volatility, both on the demand and supply side, orchestrated by changing customer demand, product qualification, and the need to also lower price. Every customer wants a lower price. And so supply chains are required to be flexible and quick to respond to these dynamics I mentioned. And to be able to do this, organizations are designing a collaborative platform-based supply chain approach to this, where both all the players in the value chain are interconnected and can communicate real time on the platform. What this does is that it removes the limitation, it removes the friction associated with having to have different layers of communication. Probably where you have to send emails and then the email may not deliver, or the mail delivers and is lost in thousands of emails for those that receives a lot of emails. So this platform approach, what it does is that it brings all the players into the same network. So that's what we call supply chain network. So that every action, every activity within the supply chain is visible to all the players, and they can proactively take actions to meet whatever need that is, or avert any risk that the supply chain might be facing. I will give you an instance. Take, for instance, you are a pharmaceutical manufacturing firm. You probably order a certain raw material or reagent from India. You order the bottle, or the preform, as they call it, from somewhere, let's say from Kenya. And then the labeling is going to be, the labeling application, the labeling tool will be provided by another supplier in Nigeria. You need to manufacture just one product. So what supply chain network or supply chain platform approach does is that it will bring these three players into the same platform, because the goal is to manufacture one product. So the one providing raw material, the one that is providing the preform, and the one that is providing the labeling are all in sync, and they can understand where each of the other provider are, and they can proactively take their actions. So also, they have visibility to probably your inventory. You can give them access to your inventory, so that if your inventory are depleting, the guy in India can proactively ask you, hey, I see that you're below this level. Do you need additional 60 units of this raw material? Do we ship it, or do we start producing? Because it will take us another 3 weeks to produce. The guy that is manufacturing preform at Kenya can now see, oh, you guys have already ordered a new raw material for another production scheduled for maybe sometime in May. Since we're in April right now, they will now say, okay, so I will need to start getting my preform ready. What quantity will meet your demand? So everything is happening right there on the platform. The labeling guy is already at alert, knowing that, well, for all this manufacturing that has happened, I will need to be available to do the correct labeling, maybe quality control, quality assurance. So all the players are right there. Even up to the warehouse is also monitoring what is happening, so that if they need to create a space after the production has been done, they need to create a space where these items will be stored temporarily before it will be dispatched to either the distribution hub or to the resellers. Everyone in the value chain are all aware of the next action to be taken, and they are not being informed. They are seeing it real time. So this is the power of supply chain network. This is the power of what digitization can do. And I think every organization should start thinking about this approach to reduce the impact of disruption, the impact that lack of visibility is causing to our supply chains today. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe it's high time companies in Africa begin to employ this platform-based approach where we can really have a real-time interaction with our suppliers to ensure that the right quantity, the right item is being purchased, and also ensure that they arrive at the right time when needed by the company. So thank you, Mr. Ifeanyi.
Thank you so much, Joseph.
Before we finally sign up, on our next episode, we shall be talking on the steps to take to employ or take advantage of the digital platforms or the digital technologies. Because once you get to know them and the how, you must also know how to take advantage of these digital technologies. So in our next episode, we shall go through the steps which companies need to employ to take advantage of digital technologies to change their procurement processes. Thank you.